All right. Well, welcome, ladies and germs, to the Waking Warrior podcast, officially episode number 12. And I'm really happy to have Scott on with me today. Actually, interestingly, back in 2017, I appeared on Scott's podcast, and he was doing a podcast, is doing a podcast for the Service Academy grads, and also running a couple other businesses, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But Scott, I just wanted to say thanks, man, for showing here. And the idea is that we start telling our stories as military veterans. So I'd love to hear your story, like starting off ideally with what prompted you to want to go to the Naval Academy in the first place. By the way, you're the first Naval Academy grad on the podcast. We're not going to hold that against you.
Yeah, hey,
So
that's okay. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. And I think, yeah, you might have been episode number 12 on mine as well. So
nice.
it's yeah, just really it's to catch up. I mean, that was 7 years ago, and
Time
um,
flies.
and it's good to see all of the good work that you're doing. Yeah, for me, I guess what kind of led me to the Naval Academy. I honestly had no intentions of ever going into the military. Growing up, I loved sports. I loved baseball, and that's all I thought about as a kid and in high school. And I guess my goal at that time of my life was to go to a good college and play Division I baseball. Like that was kind of it.
Hmm.
And I got good grades because my parents, they were kind of on me about getting good grades. And but what led me to the Naval Academy was a baseball tournament I was in, I think after my sophomore year. It was a state tournament, and one of the Naval Academy coaches was there, and I guess liked the way that I played baseball, and then started to recruit me to play baseball at the Naval Academy. So I got a letter in the mail one day. I guess I don't know how they recruit players these days. This was like 1995. So there was like a letter in the mail, and my mom, she went to the mailbox and like, oh, from the baseball coach of the Naval Academy. And it was like, everybody was all excited, and I opened it up, and, they said that they saw me in this tournament and, wanted to know if I'd be interested in playing baseball at the Naval Academy. So I don't know, how do you turn down that offer? So I guess the Academy kind of chose me in a sense, and it was a great opportunity. I grew up in Maryland, so I knew what the Naval Academy was, and knew how hard it was to get in. And I'm a competitive person, and I always I'm looking for a competitive advantage. And so I'm like, all right, well, baseball would be my competitive advantage to differentiate me from the other applicants to be able to get in and get accepted. So, and there was a little bit more to it than that, just kind of, going through the process and stuff, but that was really what led me to the academy. And yeah, and 4 years by the Chesapeake Bay there.
Nice.
So,
And my great granddad actually went to the Naval Academy. So I was see, uncle, dad, granddad, all West Pointers, and great granddad
oh wow.
was a Naval Academy grad. So it's in my blood. It's in my blood somewhere, man.
Yeah, it is in your blood, man. So, but yeah, you had to go.
Yeah, that was a bit of a challenge actually. My dad was extremely interested in making sure that's not the reason why I went. But yeah, man. So I'm like, so you graduated the Naval Academy. Like any particular thing that you wanted to share, kind of with your experiences there? I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do in the world. Did you enjoy it? What was that process like?
Yeah, so I really didn't enjoy any part of the process.
I feel
It
you.
was, yeah, I was like counting the days down to graduation from like day, I guess starting with plebe summer, right? So at first you're counting down the days to like when's plebe summer over, and then you're counting down the days to when's plebe year over, and then you're counting down the days to when's graduation. And so I always felt like I was counting down the days, which I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but it was tough. I plebe year. I was one of the youngest people in the class. I was 17. I turned 18 and I had a late birthday, so in November. So I was like a 17-year-old going into the academy. Probably would have benefited from a year of like a prep school or some sort of a place where I could have, maybe got some of those classes behind me, and also worked out like another year, like getting better at baseball. Anyways, but I went right in at 17 and just really did struggle, to be honest. I got through plebe summer, pretty fine, but that once the academic year hit, like I just got it handed to me, from an
Yeah.
academic perspective and just in sports too. I'm the youngest guy on the field. And but yeah, kind of barely squeaked through plebe year. I think I got like a 2.0 grade point average.
Nice. I
Which
graduated at
isn't like
2.7.
yeah,
So
which isn't like I mean, so you're in high school, you're an all-star, right? You're getting good grades, and you get the you're on the honor roll and all these great accolades and all and and sports like winning championships and all that, and then it's like you go there and you get your butt handed to you. So squeak through plebe year, and then and then just kind of got through. I didn't really major in anything I was that excited about. I just wanted to take classes that I could get C's and B's and at least pass and then that sort of thing. But it was really a difficult time. I think my biggest takeaway from my time there was what attracted me to the academy in the first place. It really wasn't about baseball. It really wasn't about academics or even being in the military. Although, hey, I'm so glad that I served. It was really about when I went on my recruiting trip and went there for the first time and met the people that were there. Like I kind of saw myself in them. I was like, oh my gosh, like these are the types of people that I want to be surrounded by, people that have this high level of character and people that are really high performing and people that are just good people like that. You know what I mean? Like there's just something about
yeah.
the quality of the person that goes there. And I think that's what really kind of led me to that place. It wasn't any of the majors that they had. It wasn't even being in the military. It was none of that. It was like I just want to be around people like this for the rest of my life.
Mm, I love that. And you graduated, I'm guessing sometime in May, which was before 9/11.
Yeah,
So how
yeah,
was that
May
like?
2001.
Yeah. How was that process like as a newly minted officer when I guess pardon the French, shit got real?
Yeah, it did get real. I fortunately or whatever, I think I was on a ship, so it wasn't really, like the Army guys and the Marine Corps guys. I mean, they like went right into combat. I was I was on a ship, so I was out in the middle of the ocean. But it did kind of get real, right? It was, hey, the country's at war. I just remember being deployed on 9/11, and we were it was kind of like on a fun type of a cruise. Like it was a NATO cruise. We were with maybe 10 or 11 other ships that were a part of NATO, and we would do like these drills together out on the sea, and then we'd pull into ports together, and it was kind of like a party, to be quite honest.
Nice.
And then, and then the party ended on September 11th, and it did get kind of serious. But it was really interesting to be deployed with all of those foreign countries and to see the support that they had for the U.S. During that time. They would invite crew members from our ship over to their ships. Um, some of those ships had alcohol on them, unlike the U.S. ships, right? And so we would just kind of bond, and they would take care of us and show us the news or whatever because we couldn't really see it. I don't know what they would do, things that were supportive, a lot of things that were supportive of the U.S. And so that was really interesting on that deployment. And then yeah, but yeah, definitely the security measures went up, on
Mm.
September 11th, after September 11th, and the fun kind of stopped. Fortunately, I was on ships that were kind of like not really directly involved in the mission in that mission, but it was a different time for sure.
Yeah. I talked to a lot of Army guys and obviously it's kind of a bit of a different experience almost, Army versus Navy, your deployments are different. Did you experience anything in your service that made you, or that you've dealt with later in life, for example? Were there any tough moments or any things that kind of defined you during that service time period?
Yeah, what defined me as a professional. So the second ship that I was on, the USS Camden, which was stationed out of Bremerton, Washington, and the CO of that ship actually, Ted Carter, went on to be the superintendent of the academy, and I think now
Hmm.
he's done on to some really great things. But he was our CO, and like I had a really tough job on that ship. I was the damage control assistant, so the DCA, and that's like always the job that you get that job, and you're like, oh my god, like not one that you would choose. And so the damage control assistant, and this was an AOE, a replenishment ship, so it carries the fuel and supplies, and it's like a floating gas station, right? And so now you're in charge of like all of the firefighters and the hall technicians on the ship, and it's a serious job. And all you do is like run these drills, like these firefighting drills, these flooding drills, all these different and you're the organizer of everybody. Like, so you're on the one MC, like kind of the ship's microphone or whatever, coordinating all of these battle teams constantly. Or, something happens in the middle of the night, there's some sort of flooding or some sort of thing happens, like you like, the watchstanders, call it out, and then you're out of bed in the middle of the night coordinating these damage control teams. So it was like a really tough job. And thankfully we didn't have, that I can remember, like any real like USS Cole or type disasters or anything like that. But it was really tough, and it was, you had to pass all of these inspections and um, get the ship ready to go underway. And so kind of I just wanted to like make it through that that job without like getting fired, and so it was tough. And so I felt like when I finished that tour, and we had gotten through all of the inspections, and I felt like I did a pretty good job. And again, I was like one of the youngest second tour officers on that ship because my first ship had decommissioned, and I was I was, I think maybe I served a year and a half on the first, maybe a year on the first ship, where normally you would serve 2 years.
Hmm.
So, but I got qualified, and they said, hey, you don't need to serve like a half of another first tour. Like, you're going to go to your second tour. And the second tour was this DCA job on this the Camden. And so, it's kind of going into that at 22 or 23 years old, and and kind of having a lot of responsibility and just kind of getting through it, and without really having all of the knowledge that maybe somebody that spent 2 years on their first ship would have. I don't. Um, but anyways, but I felt like that really prepared me for the jobs and the things that I would have next. Like it gave me a level of confidence where I could go in and lead a team and go through some pretty difficult times, and it would never get worse than that, I felt, from a professional standpoint, a career standpoint.
Nice. And so after your second tour, I mean, you spent 5 years total in the Navy, right?
Yep, 5 years and maybe 3 months and 4 days and 2 hours. No.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't doubt it, man. I wouldn't doubt it. And so
but
what,
5 years was the commitment. So I got out, I think, in August of, I graduated academy in 01 and got out in 06, August of 06.
yeah, so what was like what was the thought process in terms of your transition? Because I know a lot of people tend to struggle with this, figuring out what they want to do, where they want to go. So what was your transition process like?
Yeah, it was pretty terrible, honestly. I mean, it was, I think some of the traps that people walk into, and one that I walked into, was being overconfident in your abilities. And so,
Mm.
um, you know, the corporate world is like, a lot of the folks don't understand your experience, right? You could have went to the best school, you could have done all of these great things, and then, you served 5 years in the military, or 10 years or 20 years, and in a sense you're kind of behind all of a sudden, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, like, I was always like the youngest person on the team, or the youngest person that was, and I felt like that was always a good place to be. And what wasn't a good place to be was, hey, I'm 26 now, and I have a major in political science, which I just majored in that because so I could graduate from the academy. Like, I had no interest in political science, but it was relatively easy. Not, I mean, it was relatively speaking, right? And so what am I worth like now? And so I go out and I didn't prepare enough for the transition. I just wanted to have fun when I was on shore duty. And I did go to business school, so that was one thing I did. My wife talked me into going to business school, and I really loved it. And I really found that I was passionate about business, and I was always good in math, and that was a way that I could apply being good at math in a way that excited me. Like, hey, like, how do we make money, right? And and there's a competitive aspect to business, and I felt like that was my calling, but I didn't really
Hmm.
know like what kind of path I wanted to take in business. So, but the things that I started too late trying to find a job, so if I got out in August, maybe it was May that I started like trying to find a job,
Oh
which is
man.
to give yourself at least like a year, right? And
Yeah.
really start putting feelers out there, really starting. There's so many support programs today compared to back then, um, but so that was problem number one. And then it just takes a while, right, to build those relationships, to find the right job, to find the right thing. And, maybe I think I started my job in January. So there was like 4 months after the military, which, hey, maybe you deserve that, right? Hey, take a few months off and figure out what you want to do. And my wife was working at the time, so that was helpful, she could help support financially while I tried to figure things out. But hey, man, we're go-getters, right? Like, I don't want to sit around the freaking house and
Yep.
like look for jobs. Like, I felt like a loser. And I was going to business school and finishing that up at the time, so that gave me some purpose. And but that was kind of like maybe my transition, the direct transition out was, you know, I would recommend like spending more time on that, process, and then really figuring out, if I had to do it again, um, what it is you actually want to do, right? And
Hmm.
then the layer beneath that is like figuring out like, what are your strengths? What gives you energy? And really dialing that in. And so there's lots of tools that were helpful to me kind of along the way, like the Clifton Strengths Assessment. That Gallup came out with this Clifton Strengths Assessment. I took that maybe 10 years after my transition, which I wish I would have taken it in high school. But that showed me what my strengths were, you know, and I saw things on the assessment like futuristic, like futuristic, like, wow, like I didn't even know I didn't know that it was futuristic. But now
Hmm.
I can see it very clearly that, hey, I like to create things. I like to envision things. I can see things before other people can see them. I saw includer was one of my strengths, and that's like my kind of community builder strength. And those were two strengths on there and then competition. I knew that I was probably competitive. I could have guessed that, but includer and futuristic were ones where I was like, man, like, how do I leverage those, and how do I invest more time in those strengths? Because I don't feel like were never, being used in the jobs that I had. And and so I kind of created my own thing, where eventually created my own thing. I mean, so from 2006 to, we had did the podcast together in 2017, and that's when I was kind of first starting out. So 11 years went by, in different jobs and, different companies, that it kind of took me to figure out what in the world do I actually want to do, and who are the people that I actually want to work with, and what gives me energy, and how do I create something that has all of those things, all of those ingredients.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's actually pretty common. I believe the statistic is something like most military veterans move through 2.4 jobs until they figure out what actually resonates with them. So that, I mean, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So how do you
Would
close
you?
that gap? Like, how do you?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you,
That's a lot of
like, how
time.
do you
11
like?
years. Hmm.
Yeah, like how do you close that gap? Because it's like one thing to like sit down and do like a strengths and weaknesses assessment, but like how does that translate to the real world? And then you kind of bring in the fact that a lot of times people need to start working immediately. And yeah, it's just a complicated. So I mean, with your own experience and kind of what you've been, the grads that you've been talking to, how do we begin to close that gap? Like outside of probably just starting the transition process a little sooner, what's a way that we can find what actually resonates with us, what we actually want to do?
Yeah. You want to hear my hack? So
I do.
what went wrong every single time? Um, it was the person that you're spending the most time with during the day. Like, who is that person, right?
Mm,
So it could be a customer, it could be a coworker. And what drew me going back to the academy was the person. It was like, who's like, what I really enjoyed most about my time there, what got me through it, was the people that I was around, right? And so an exercise that somebody could do at any time in their life, if they find themselves a little bit disengaged, a little bit like, hey, I feel like something's off here. I feel like I'm not living my purpose. I feel like I'm not maximizing my potential. It's like, take out a blank sheet of paper and describe the person that you want to help, right? The person that you want on your Zoom call, on your Zoom screen every day, or on your that's calling you on the phone every day. Who is it? Like, and you don't have to list a name or anything like that, but describe their
mm,
characteristics and their goals and their challenges and who this person is, right? And that's like, before you even start with yourself, like, um I think getting really clear on that solves a lot of the problems that you might run into by getting a job that's like, you get a job because hey, I had this sort of experience, I'm a leader, I'm a manager, whatever your resume says, and then you just get your next job based on like what your last job was, versus like, forget about your resume, forget about all of that. Like, who's the person that you actually want to help? And that's it. Like I feel like if somebody can get really clear on that, then the career will just figure out itself. Like, money will just show up in your mailbox or in your email. Like, you'll just get paid because, and you're going to do great work because you're so passionate about the work that you're doing and the people that you're serving. So,
mm.
um, and I've done that a number of, yes. And so I feel like, and at every job that I had, I wasn't necessarily serving the customers that I had much in common with, or that I really identified with their challenge, or working with the coworkers that I felt like we had the same goals. So
Nice. That's a great hack.
that's a
It's really
that will
good.
save that will save and it doesn't take a lot. It's like if somebody's looking for, I mean, you could do that exercise for a lot of different things, right? Hey, I'm looking for a spouse or whatever. Like, it's like, well, describe the person. Like, is it that you want this person to, like, what do you want them to be like? And you know what? They're gonna show up. And so, you know, when
Mm,
I kind of got clear on that, people that met my description of like, hey, who is it what's the challenge I want to solve? What are the goals of the people I want to help? They started showing up on Zoom calls, and then as customers, and then you get paid. Like, you actually get paid eventually, and you're around like your friends, and so I kind of have a saying, like, kind of, grow through life with friends, so like I don't want to do business with people I don't like, or that I don't really have much in common with, or that I feel are like nagging me or whatever. Like I want to serve and work with people that give me energy. And when you're getting paid in a way that's doing something that gives you energy, it's not work. It's just like fun, so
Yeah, agreed.
right.
I love that. So you kind of went into entrepreneurship basically. You spent like what 6 or 7 years in the corporate world, more or less, but you kind of drifted into entrepreneurship. Like, what was that like, and what sort of attracted you to that path as opposed to staying in corporate?
Yeah, I didn't see a path in the corporate world. I didn't see myself, working at any of the companies that I was working for like 20 years from now, right? I just didn't see that as any sort of a solution towards like what would make me happy. So then I was like, well, I got to invent something then, and create something for myself that, where I don't have to go through life and doing something where I don't feel like there's an end game for me. So back to the Clifton Strengths Assessment, I took that, and I think like everybody at some point, I call it like the 10,000 hours in the self-help section. So I did. I had and when people put in their time, like you talk to them and you're like, yeah, like they're saying all the things that they learned in the self-help section, and so so part of my, like, I would listen to Jim Rohn CDs on the way to work. Podcasts had just hit the scene. I was listening to podcasts on the way to work. I mean, I was immersing myself in this world of entrepreneurship, and so because yeah, and I knew I was a hard worker. I knew I had grit and determination, all of that, but I had never started a business before. But there was something about it that was like, man, that's kind of exciting. Like, but back to the Clifton Strengths Assessment. So that was part of my 10,000 hours in the self-help section. Took this assessment. I loved it. It really helped me figure out what I could do best and what my talents were. And I actually became a Gallup strengths coach. I became one of the first 100 people that went through their coaching process, and I was doing a little bit of coaching, kind of one-on-one stuff, like outside of my day job in the evening. Most of it was like free. I don't know if I was even getting paid, but
Nice.
I was just trying to help people. Like, hey, like, what is your challenge, and what are your goals? But what I did do was I was like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if people take this assessment and then they could buy a coffee mug with their top 5 strengths on it. And I mean, at the time, like 10 million people had taken the Clifton Strengths Assessment. Today, over 30 million people have taken it. And so I created I found a print shop that would print customized mugs, because every order is different, because everybody has different strengths and different orders of like what their strengths are. And I found a print shop. It took me like a little while to find one that would do one-offs like that. And Shopify had just hit the scene. So I started the Shopify store for less than $500. Like, I had this online store. I had a way for people to pay me. I had a product that was for a very specific market. I had access to that market through a Facebook group that I was in that had like 5,000 strengths people in it. And then I knew a couple of like influencers that had taken the assessment, and that was my launch. So I was like at work on a Friday afternoon. I think this was 2016, and my store was set up. I was kind of just sitting there at my desk and like, hey, like, why haven't you launched this thing yet? And so Friday afternoon at like 3 o'clock, I just dropped a link in the Facebook group to strengthsmugs.com, which is the name of the online store. And like literally within 10 minutes, I had an order. I was like, wow, this is
Nice.
the coolest thing. And then I sent a tweet back to this guy. His name is Michael Hyatt, who's a best-selling author and influencer. He must have had like 300,000, Twitter followers. And I knew he had taken the assessment because I had listened to so many podcasts. and stuff. So that's like, and I knew what his strengths were. And so I said, and his number one strength is achiever. So I was like, hey, Michael, your achiever strength would look great on this strengths mug. And so I sent him a picture of a strengths mug with a link to the store. And then I left for the day, left work or whatever. And and
I
then
think I know where this is going.
I'm driving home and I'm sitting at a stoplight, and I just like looked at my email on my phone and I saw like Michael Hyatt retweeted your post, like your tweet to like 300,000 people. And then it was like orders were coming in all weekend of for these mugs. And so for the first time, I felt like, man, I created something from nothing. People are paying me. I'm getting email money, basically, like email money. I don't have to print the mugs because I have a print shop that prints them. And this is really cool. Like I felt that was the proudest moment I think in my whole career up to that point, outside of like, getting through some of those jobs in the Navy and making it through those tough times and serving in the military, where I really felt, hey, you did something. Like you actually did something that I felt like was kind of cool. So anyways, that was strengthsmugs.com. I still do that today. But that's what led me to lead to start the SABM Group Service Academy Business Mastermind, which you were a guest on the podcast maybe a year later. It's like, I just want us to wrap back to designing the person, right? Like, who is it that you want to work with? I really wanted to work with academy grads, military veterans that were entrepreneurial minded and were starting businesses. And that's who I wanted to surround myself with every day.
Well, you've done a really great job at that. I mean, I remember even back in 2017, it's like within the service academy community is actually pretty small, I think. And it was like, hey, you really need to talk to Scott. Yeah, he's doing some great spaces. So as I was getting started as an entrepreneur, I looked up a lot to what you were doing, and you inspired me a lot. So I wanted to, thank you for that.
Yeah, man. So, and then, I left my job and we ended up moving my family. We did a whole life reset. So we, back to kind of like designing your future, so like my wife and I were sitting around, probably drinking a glass of wine or, whatever, like one frigid, cold, dreary night in Massachusetts in February, like the dark ages. I think we call those times at the academy, like the dark ages, right? So in Massachusetts, I mean, the dark ages are much longer than in Annapolis. So but we're just like, hey, if we didn't have to live somewhere because like, one of us grew up there or because we worked there, like that's why you live. Most people, 90% of people live in a place because they have to, because they work there or they grew up in that place, right? Mm-hmm. And now it might be a little bit different after post-COVID and a lot of work is remote. But we're like, hey, like, where would we live? It might not be here. So like we just started describing like, hey, well, what would be the characteristics of the place where we might want to live, and what would bring us joy? And so we sat around and it was like, all right, well, we want to live where it's warm most of the year. Okay. So we like wrote that down. We want to live on the East Coast, so that, because our families are on the East Coast, and we want to live close to the beach, and we want to live close to an airport in case we want to fly somewhere and get there quickly. We want to live in a place that has a great school system for our kids, and and a few other things, right? And so, and then we just kind of tucked it away, like that whatever that list, that sheet of paper, I just put it in a notebook or something. And then 2 years later, on our 10-year anniversary, my dad had just retired from his job, and he came up and was like, hey, can you watch the kids for a week? Michelle and I, it's my wife's name, we're going to go and on a trip. So we were big Zac Brown band fans. Like we were in the Zamley and like the fan club. So we're like, nice. We wanted to go catch a few Zac Brown shows in Raleigh and then Atlanta. And then the last leg of the trip was Charleston, South Carolina. But we had never been to Charleston. Like, we've never been to Charleston. It's not too far from Atlanta. Let's make that the last leg, and then we'll fly home from there. So we're out finishing up the road trip. We're driving to Charleston. We get there. We end up on this little beach called Sullivan's Island for dinner, and we're walking out on the beach and like looked at each other. We're like, hey, like remember that vision board? Remember, like this is it. And I still get like tingles like thinking about that. But like we had never even been to that. We'd never been to Charleston. I had a lot of buddies that lived here, like went to the nuclear power school and all of that, but it was always too far off of 95 to like stop there for like on a road trip. So I never went. And here we are, we're in Charleston, Sullivan's Island, which is a beautiful place. And this was the place that we had described that one night 2 years ago. And then we were like, all right, well, how do we figure this out, right? And so, 2 years later, that took us a couple of years to unwind what we were doing. She was running a family business. I was, I had my day job and my side hustles, and we just packed up and left. And I had to get a job down here that lasted about 6 months, and then I went all in on all my business stuff, and it was scary, and I had about a year of financial runway to get it going. So 2017, so this must have been 2018, 5 years ago. So 2019, I left my job March 1st, 2019. I came home on a Friday and said, hey, I quit my job today, and I'm going all in on all of it, like SABM group and all of it. And that decision changed my life. It was scary. It was, and there's a lot of like, I know you do a lot of like, spiritual work and that sort of thing, but there was a lot of like, I had to look myself in the eye and say like, or in the mirror and like say, hey man, are you like serious about this? Are you going to reach your full potential? Because if you are, you have to go all in. And I did. And, I think there's a saying, I have it up on my wall somewhere, William Hutchinson or something. I forget what, I'll look it up. But like when you finally when you decide what you want to do, like all of the resources that you might need come to you, right? The people.
Yes, I believe that too.
Right. But it's scary as shit, man, like to actually do it, like to actually decide to do the thing that you really want to do, knowing that, hey, if it doesn't work out, like, I don't know, maybe it would be fine. Maybe you just get another job or something. But like, we tend to focus on all the negative things, like, oh, like we're gonna like we just moved to Charleston and now our house is gonna get foreclosed on, like we're gonna be bankrupt, we're gonna live out on the streets, and like those are all the thoughts that are going through your mind in the middle of the night, before you take the leap off the cliff. So
well, metaphorically speaking.
So but yeah, so here, yeah, 5 years later, I'm not out on the streets yet. I'm still able to pay the bills.
Still kicking. I love that. So, all right. So you got Strengths Mugs, which was like really your first. You've got the Service Academy Business Mastermind. And then we were mentioning before we hit recording, you're up to something new, right?
Yeah. So Service Academy Business Mastermind. I didn't have much of a business model for that when I started. It was more of like, hey, I just want to surround myself with like-minded people, connect like-minded people, create value for a community that I think very highly of, and we'll see where it goes. So my I guess my differentiator with SABM Group, and this was 2017, was that I was digital, right? It was like, hey, we're going to do meetups, but they're not going to be like at somebody's office. It's going to be on Zoom. And then so I would invite people to these meetups every month, and it was crazy. It was like, man, like people didn't have to drive anywhere. It was like it was like, what's an online networking meetup in 2017? Like nobody's doing those. And so so I would host these online networking meetups every month, and I just met a ton of people, like connected a ton of people. People were getting value from it. And so that was one thing. And then the other thing was the podcast. It was like, hey, at any event you go to, there's a guest speaker, but and so, all right, well, what if the guest speaker, what if it was just digital where like, these speakers were like podcast guests and, they were academy grads and business owners and sharing their stories and talking about all the trials and tribulations. And so I did the podcast, and both of those things like got like immediately, like with like, just like strength mugs, like, you just know when something, an offer that you send out hits and resonates like instantly. And if it doesn't, hey, maybe it needs some work, right? And so for the meetups, people were coming every month. It was like we get 30 or 40 people on the calls, and people got value. The podcast, I think I did the first interview was with Tyler Merritt, who started 9line Apparel. He was people know what 9line Apparel is, and I had built this email list of academy grads, and I emailed it out, and it was like instant, like boom, like people list, like it must have got 100 downloads that day. And so and so that's kind of was the starting point. And then fast forward 7 years later, I had to figure out a business model for this, because it had to be self-sustaining. So today kind of what it looks like is so SABM Group still do the podcast and still do a free networking call every month. That's kind of what the meetup has evolved to. But we've got a number of different programs and things. So one is an investor group. So we've got about just over 600 accredited investors in an investor group that meets once a month. Every month we have 6 to 7 presenters who each give a 7-minute fast pitch of an opportunity. It could be a real estate project, it could be a startup, it could be an investment fund, and that meets monthly. And so we've got an investor group. We also have an investment fund called the Academy Fund. And so we do short-term bridge financing, specifically to military veteran real estate investors. So folks that are doing fix and flip projects or want to purchase an investment property quickly, and like everything that a bank can't do, like that's kind of where we come in. And so over the last, started that almost 4 years ago now, 3.5, 4 years ago, we've raised about $30 million from accredited investors. Wow. We've lent out about $60 million to academy grads and military veteran real estate investors. And it's, and there's a whole team behind that. So that's academyfund.com. And then we have an executive community called 10X Vets. And 10X Vets is kind of like a Vistage or like an EO type executive community, but it's all veterans. And so it's like full-time business owners, full-time people that are pretty high caliber that all are veterans. And so we do regional meetups every quarter in really cool parts of the country. We do a lot of different Zoom workshops and meetups throughout the month. And so that's 10X Vets. And those are, kind of what SABM Group over the 7 years has evolved into. But starting with coffee mugs. I don't know.
Dude, that's wonderful though. I mean, I love how you're really tying like your own particular niche of the community together, and wow, just you've been up to a lot. That's super cool. Yeah, I think it's like we were talking a little bit earlier on the call about like I feel like there's this kind of expectation of West Point grads to kind of be cookie cutter corporate machines, and we're not doing that. We're going down our own paths, and I found it extremely rewarding, and it sounds like you have as well.
Yeah, so to that point, maybe just to underscore what you just said, veterans, people that served in the military, whether they went to an academy or not, or whatever, right? It's like you get treated the same when you're in the military. Mm-hmm. Everybody's the same. Everybody wears the same uniform, for the most part. Everybody, it's just kind of like you're treating, which is fine, I guess, right? It's like, hey, you don't have to think of there's a benefit to that in some regard. The problem is it's hard to figure out like, well, where do you stand out? Like standing out in the military is like you get like shot back down. They're like, sit down. Like, you know what I mean? And
Very
so,
much not the thing to do.
right, yeah, you can't really stand out. Um, and but we all should stand out, right? We all are different. We all have these superpowers, our strengths, our talents, and everybody shouldn't be treated equally, like, and so, you know, I guess, or maybe rewarded equally. I don't know what the right saying is, but it is good to be fair, and I think that's super important. But at the end of the day, like if somebody goes above and beyond, or somebody has this weird like talent that's like really cool, like you should go explore that, right? And like how can that create value for the team? And so I think we get beat down a lot in the military and kind of put into this mold, and probably for a reason, right? For a purpose, like we're going to fight these battles and protect the country, and that's that, right? So we're defending the country, but when you get out, like you got to find yourself, right? You got to go through you got to hit the self-help section, right? And hey, like who am I really, and what is my purpose for being here, and who do I want to surround myself with and help and serve, and like and like how do I get paid for that, right? Like we need to get paid. And so yeah, and so that's a challenge, I guess, right? Like you found your path, which is a lot different than it was 7 years ago when we did the podcast.
True. Yeah, it was at that point I was just focused on building a business so I could buy a yacht. And now
There we go.
like I want to help people, and I want to buy a teepee for my home so I can have a place to offer ceremonies. It's like I'm deep in the spiritual traditions. Like that's what I want to do. I'm developing a 130-acre retreat here in Colombia for military veterans with the idea of, like longer stays, connection with nature. Those are the things that I want to do with my time now. It's this idea of like, well, like I've done basically the majority of the experiences I want to do. I traveled with my little Yorkie Terrier for 8 months on a motorcycle, and I've been all around Latin America and traveled the world. And it's like, now I just want to like, okay, how can I make an impact? How can I do something that matters and help people along the way? And that's
And
what drives me now.
what was the turning point for you? Like from what was from wanting to own the yacht, to kind of doing what you were doing back then with, the build business that you had built, what was your jumping off the cliff moment, where you just decided like, hey, I want to go in a different direction and really bet on myself, maybe in a different way?
I was continually sort of putting these expectations that one thing or another would make me happy. So when I was in the corporate world, I was like, well, if I get a high paycheck and a nice car, okay, still not happy. Well, maybe the thing for me is entrepreneurship. Maybe if I get $50,000 a month, that'll make me happy. Still not happy. And at this point, I'm running out of things that like people are going to tell you that you're going to be happy for. And so I ended up moving down to Colombia, and I started to awaken to the idea that people were living their lives in a different way. Like down here in Colombia and Latin America, I mean, they're very connected and warm and loving and touchy and like huggy. And it's I was like, okay, this is kind of weird, but all right, I kind of like it, And so I started getting around to it toward the point where I realized that I was fundamentally different. Like I wasn't like really connecting as a person. I wasn't really happy, and I wasn't really doing many things with my life. So that ended up leading me into ayahuasca. And ayahuasca really, really opened my eyes to a lot of the things that I needed to start working on and healing. So I started working down that path. And the answer to your question is, I got this theory. And basically, if you start working on yourself and you start healing yourself, you end up wanting to help others. You make some sort of a transition from I'm going to work on just me to I'm going to work with others. Otherwise, you're kind of a dick. And that happened to me. It's like, well, this has been so great for my life, and I wake up with a smile now. Like, why is everyone not smiling? And what can I do about it? How can I live my life in a way that, like at the academies, they teach you about leadership. And for me, the essence of leadership is an invitation. Like, I'm going to live my life in such a way that other people want to emulate that. Like, what are you doing, Scottie? And how can I follow that path? And I don't know, it's just for me a much better way to orient my life than to try to think about like, oh, I want a yacht. Like what a selfish dick I was, man. You know?
Yeah. Do you ever get to the point where, um, or maybe, along your journey where, whatever that feeling of having the yacht or the $50,000 a month or whatever that feeling was that you were searching for, like, that you already have that inside of you, and
Y-
like you don't need the yacht or
Yeah.
fifty thousand
You have
dollars.
to find it. You have to find it. It like they say it exists within you, like you have the capability to feel that way, to feel good, to feel happy, to feel joyful in life. And yeah, like still there are a lot of things that don't go right in my life. I have challenges and you know difficulties with friends and broken relationships and sometimes I don't have as much money as I want. But I know with a certainty now that the direction that I'm living my life and the way in which I'm living it and the community that I've surrounded myself with makes it so worth it. Like I know that I'm moving in the right direction now, and that certainty, that peace, is worth any amount of money. Like I would take this and be broke rather than have $1 million in the bank account and be back where I was 10 years ago. Just unhappy. It's like this idea of like you were counting time at the at the academy, right? I was counting time through life. What a what a like for me, life is such a gift. Why would we waste it and just kind of like, okay, well, kind of waiting for the day to end? If you're not like living your life in a way that like you look back on the day like, man, what a great day. Can't wait for tomorrow. Like something probably needs to change.
Yeah, and what a great place when you find that, like that,
So,
where you're enjoying every day and savoring every moment. And I just remember, yeah, some of the jobs I had, like just looking at the clock every day, like, man, when is it going to be like 5 o'clock? I can't wait for it to be 5 o'clock. I can't wait for this day to be over. What a different place to
so
be in when it's, and then you go home, and then it's like you're just trying to squeeze it all in. Like you go home and like, you pound a couple of beers, like you're like, oh, thank God the day's over. And then
yeah.
a year goes by or 5 years goes by, and it's like, what in the world am I doing? And like what, the place that you're describing now is like, now you're like, you don't want the days to end. It's like,
Yeah. No, that's really it. Like I'm doing something that's meaningful to me and I'm connecting with veterans and talking to and forging relationships and the community that I really care about. And I'm with that, it's like everything else opens. It's very difficult to describe what it's like to live a happy life to someone that hasn't lived it that way before. Because like they've got no sort of framework or context to build that on. And I'm like, I get done with my workday here and I go over to a friend's house to play some guitar and like have a little, like there was a little get together, a concert a couple nights ago. And I got there a little bit early. And so one of the things I'm doing to expose like and encourage my creativity, I'm learning how to crochet. So I'm making little coasters and little jar covers and like I'm actually making a doll right now and I was laughing at myself because I'm making like a little crocheted doll of like an Aztec god. And it's
okay.
just like this seems cool. I want to do this. So I'm just sitting there crocheting at my friend's house before a medicine music concert. It's like of all the things that I thought I would be doing at 36 years old, making a doll is not one of them. But you know what? I'm digging it. I'm having a good time. So let's
Yeah,
go.
so let's riff on that for just a minute, if we still have some time. But I feel like,
Yeah.
I think that was like kind of like I had to take care of like my career first. I felt like, hey, this is what provides for my family. I need to find something that's like I want to do for the long term, and that's great. Um, but kind of going back to baseball, like in playing sports all my life, that's like who I was growing up.
Mm,
And I gave all of that up, like back, when I was after senior year at the academy. Um, I didn't play it. I'm like, I didn't play sports anymore. And,
mm,
and it was like, and the reasons were, hey, it's childish. Hey, it's not going to lead to anything. Um, those are kind of like were the main reasons. Like, what's the ROI that I'm going to get on going out and playing a sport? And
yeah.
so 20 years went by, and we moved to Charleston, and my wife had this recurring dream for all of her life about playing tennis. She never played a sport, but she had this recurring dream about playing tennis. And then there was a tennis clinic that was happening in our neighborhood. Tennis is really big down here. She's like, I think I'm going to go out into the clinic. And so like she did it, right? And she joined these teams and all of this. And then she's like, Scott, I really think you should play tennis. I'm like, oh, like I used to play when I was a kid at the playground, and I went out and I'm like, I felt pure joy out there just running around.
Oh man.
Competitive, right? Like so, but why did 20 years go by? Why did I let 20 years go by with and not be true to like something that was really important to me growing up? And like and the funny thing is, Scottie, I had never won a state championship in freaking baseball. Never. You know, like we made it to like the semifinals, you know, never won the state championship. In my first year playing tennis, I haven't played a sport in 20 years. First year playing tennis, where I joined the USTA league. I'm like at the beginning level, the 3-0 level, over 40 men's team, and we win the state championship.
No way.
Like you gotta be
Dude, congrats, man.
like
Congrats.
all of my life, you know. Yeah, and then we went to Auburn University and we competed against all these other states. And I was like, dude, it took you all of this time to win a state championship. You know, but it was this kind of funny. But so I guess my point there is like, you know, you're talking about like crochet and these things that people might think are like childish or weird or whatever, but
well, it's definitely weird. I get it. I'll be the person with that.
Don't let those things go. Like make those things that were a part of your life, maybe growing up, still a part of your life today. And go out there and play with your friends. Like, I don't know, who cares if you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 40 or whatever your age is. Like, go out there and like have fun and whatever that thing is for you that brought you joy earlier in life.
And that's what I think a lot of the self-help section books kind of miss. Right. So it's this idea of like, and not all of them, but especially the more business focused ones, you know, like, oh, I got to be more productive and got to do this, and, you know, like drive yourself like super hard. And I'm not saying that like what we're creating are businesses, of course they require work, but there's also a need for balance in life, you know? So as an entrepreneur, like I was quite unhappy for a while. I was like working 18-hour days kind of thing, like punishing myself, you know, just at the grindstone, like Gary Vaynerchuk style. And it was like, there's so much more to life than that. It's like, what are you building the business for? So I can have freedom. Like, well, why can't I have a little bit of freedom now? You know, like,
Right.
why do I need to wait till I have like a $5 million revenue business or something, whatever the number is? And also this idea of like, I don't think people understand how when you do things that are meaningful to you and that give you joy, like winning a tennis championship or doing like, it's so much better use of your time, and it makes you more efficient and effective at everything else. You know, like, so I barely am on my phone now anymore. I'm just going to pick up some crochet because it's doing something that's keeping my mind active and allows me to think. And I'm not just sitting there mindlessly scrolling, comparing myself to everybody else on Instagram and being unhappy for it. So it's like, just go explore and be weird and go play. Exactly what you said.
Go play.
You know?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, the other night I just started. I remember like at the academy, we like there would be 4 of us in the room at night after we did our homework, and we'd play spades. Like I loved it, man. Like we'd be up till midnight playing spades, which is a card game. Like man, I haven't played spades since then. And so like, so now like I'm sitting in bed like, you know, like the other night, seriously, like I typed in spades like in Google and like I want to play spades, just like I did back at the academy, like, and it was fun. And so now like every night before bed, man, I'll play like 2 or 3 games. But it brings back all of those those memories and just like, hey, it's fun. Like it's but just don't let 20 years go by like I did, you know, or you know, a lot of people do, and not do those little things that you really enjoyed that you might not think there's some sort of an ROI.
Yeah, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, man. You know, there's this military meme where somebody's coming, you know, a soldier's coming into a doctor, and the doctor was like, "Oh, you know, how much pain are you in?" "Oh, the normal kind." And the doctor's like, "No, man, the normal kind is 0, no pain. That's normal." and it like I just want to see more of our brothers and sisters starting to enjoy life again. Because, it's not like sometimes I think for a lot of us, it can be this struggle to like, well, I got to get back to at least like not wanting to, in my life, for example. But it's so much more than that, man. And then once we get to this place, like our natural creativity and just humanity, like starts to bubble up, and we create businesses and we create communities, and it's just I'm so excited about that, and I want to work for that being more of a reality than what it currently is, which is just kind of like this slog through life. And well, at least I'm not gonna not gonna jump off a bridge. Like let's get to a better place.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So it's all a journey.
Yeah, brother. Well, I really appreciate, man. I appreciate your time here and the wonderful story that you had to share with us, and the wonderful work that you've been doing to connect Service Academy business owners, and to encourage vets to um, build their own businesses and real estate investment. So I'm really looking forward, man, to coming on your podcast again and kind of showcasing like the 7 or 8 years massive difference. Like entrepreneur coder Scottie to full blown hippie.
Yeah.
Like let's
Everything
go.
now.
Yeah,
Good
man.
stuff, Scottie. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast.
It's my absolute pleasure, brother.